I guess I should talk about what got me here, and what really appeals to me about the Clinton School is obviously the importance that this service and experiential learning is really a part of the curriculum, and I think that that's something that needs to be embraced, and to me that's one of the most special aspects about the program that the students here that you're a part of. And you know, for me, I came to this lifestyle in a much more circuitous manner. And basically, you know, I went to college and I studied cultural anthropology. So every day I was, you know, learning about these foreign cultures, past and present, and it was very eye-opening. But at the same time, when I graduated, I felt like I wanted to see for myself some of the, you know, all these wonderful cultures that I had studied. So decided to travel the world thinking, okay, you know, I'm going to put the career off for a year and do my little travel, and then I'll kind of get it out of my system and I'll be ready to buckle down and get my 9 to 5. Well, for those students that have had the opportunity to travel a bit, you probably realize that a wanderlust kind of develops, and suddenly that first year turned into, wow, that was pretty incredible. What am I going to do next year? It was hard to top. So what's really important is really, I was talking to Skip about this earlier, is the form of travel. And I think that for me personally, it was the real immersive style of travel that really gave birth to my social consciousness that developed, because I was really, I mean, at the time it was based on necessity, on the fact that I didn't really have a lot of money to be, you know, if you're going to go spend 8 months traveling around the world, you can't be staying in fancy hotels. So it was all about, you know, more bang for the buck, getting by and staying wherever I could, kind of for the least amount of money possible, and eating, you know, street food and everything. So, but in doing that is when I had the opportunity to get to know people on that personal level, and just kind of rubbing elbows with everyday people. And you know, I mean, one of the most impressionable experiences was early on in that trip. I was in the Philippines. I was in Manila with my best friend, and first day we kind of done some touristy stuff, and then second day, you know, I said, Les, you know what I was thinking about? Let's go over to that. Remember when we drove in, we passed that big looking shanty town? He said, yeah. I said, let's just go over there and just take a look. He's like, seriously? I said, well, look, let's just go in. I'm not going to take, I don't have any Rolex on or anything. Just go in and just, you know, get an impression, just talk to people, whatever. And just being in there right when we walked in, you know, yeah, a few people came up to us and asked us kind of like, why are you here? You know, I said, well, we're just here, you know, we ended up playing basketball, and all the kids wanted to, you know, recite Snoop Dogg lyrics with me, and it just turned into this little love fest, and we had a blast, and like, you guys, you got to stay here, you got to come back. And you know, it was that kind of experience that I realized, you know, I saw the poverty that they were living in, and I saw the conditions, and that's when this spark within me was kind of like, you know, it was like this empathy that was born. It was just, and that's kind of the compassion, and from there, you know, the next step was, okay, now I can see what they're going through, and I can see where I came from, and then there was kind of that curiosity developed. You know, well, why is it that they're in this situation? What, you know, what does it have to do with why is their socioeconomic condition at such an abject level? And then obviously the next natural progression is, well, what can I do to help? And so from there, I started to, in my travels, I started to think about, you know, what would be the best way for me to kind of apply my interest or my expertise, as it may be, over the years to furthering the cause of people like this. And so I decided, after about, you know, 2.5 years of traveling, I decided to go back to graduate school so I could pursue a career in international relations. And so while I was in DC, I was able to, you know, take a lot of these classes and learn more of the kind of the technical aspect of development, and a lot of the, you know, a lot of the just kind of the history and methodology, which was very valuable. And I also was able to, I was an intern with the United Nations, with the High Commission for Refugees. UNHCR is based in DC, so I was working there as kind of a public affairs intern, which was very fascinating. I was responsible with basically reading. It's an ideal job. I'd take it any day. Of reading all the newspapers and press of the day, and kind of sending out a massive email to every UNHCR office in the world with clips from all these papers and sources about different issues affecting regions with refugees. So it opened my eyes to a lot of the humanitarian problems in the world. And I was able to go down to Colombia and do some hands-on research there. And that experience really inspired me to seek a way to kind of use my own hands-on experience, as I said, in some of these regions. So what I started to do after graduate school, as Skip mentioned, I did a Fulbright in Spain, and being there again, I got to Spain on September 10th, 2001. So my first morning was 9/11, and being in Spain was a real eye-opening experience, especially since my mission there was working with a lot of the Moroccan immigrants coming into Spain. So being an American place there and being in Morocco was a wonderful opportunity for me to. I was really just it turned into kind of an informal diplomat of sorts. I mean, just to be able to be a bridge between cultures at a very important time. And from there, I just started to raise money for different projects. I qualified for I received a grant to go down to Rio, go down to Brazil and do some work with the street children there in the favelas, the shanty towns. So I just raised money. It's real just grassroots. I didn't really have any experience at the time in fundraising of any sort, but just try to use my personal story and my passion to inspire people to donate to the cause. And so that first trip was really, a very experiential form of development, which was just going down, and I said I knew I wanted to find a children's community center down in one of these shanty towns and find a way to make a real profound difference. And even with the limited amount of money that I had, which is maybe about $3,500. So I volunteered with a variety of projects down there and got familiar with them and how they were run, and found one that was off the beaten track in a real small favela that's outside of the city a bit, so they don't have any foreigners, they don't have any, real volunteers or anyone showing up trying to help out. So I was able to really look for ways. So what I'll do is when I get to a project is I'll look for the most effective way to deliver these funds instead of just handing over some cash. You have to be really careful, especially when this money is coming from my donors. It's my personal responsibility to be sure that it's delivered in the most effective and conscientious manner. So in a case like that, it was, I saw these kids who are coming from school. They only have 3 or 4 hours of school in Brazil because the education system can't afford to send kids to school for the whole day. So the rest of the time they're out on the streets, and as many people know from just popular media or movies like City of God or whatever, these kids the favelas are being run by the drug traffickers, and these kids are brought into the whole system at a very young age. And seeing a 9-year-old kid with little swimsuit and flip-flops and Magnum in his hand is a very impressionable experience. So it's really important to get these kids off the streets and into a nurturing environment. And another one of the problems there is just the malnutrition, and that's something that I knew about and I could see firsthand. And so I said to the director of the project, well, is there any way to, why don't we get these kids some food? Well, we get them snacks. Well, the snacks are like, Kool-Aid and candy bars that somebody had donated. I said, well, that's not going to go very far. What would it take for us to get a hot lunch program together? And so that's the kind of thing where you sit down with the director and explain your desire and work out the logistics of how it's going to be done. So, you've got projects like that. They just kind of grew. It just kind of grew from one thing to another. After Brazil, I went down to Cambodia, and I was doing some work with orphanages down there. Again, to me, one of the most powerful impacts is seeing how far the dollar goes in these countries. As we know, with the exchange rate and the standard of living is so low in some of these countries that, I can take $100 and make such a big difference. And then you think about, wow, that was $100. The story that Skip was alluding to, I was telling about at lunch, is very simple. It was just an orphanage that had very, very, very meager kitchen supplies, trying to cook for 50 kids, and all the kids have to scramble to eat off of a big platter, and it's like, these kids need some dignity, and the people working there need some help. It's hard to cook for 50 people when you have one pot, and as you can imagine. So something like that is it's often a small amount of money, but basically their dream kitchen, as Oprah would say. I just went to the market and purchased everything that they needed, and when I dropped this stuff off, everybody was ecstatic, and when you walk away and you realize that I just spent $85, it really drives home the point that if given in a very effective way, that a small amount of money can make a very profound difference. And so that's what I've really been focused on ever since. The work that I was working with a nonprofit based in California called 100 Friends, which was founded by my mentor, a wonderful, wonderful man named Mark Gold. And he's been doing this kind of work for about 20 years, so I had a lot to learn from him. And he saw my interest. We had known each other for years. I had visited him in some of his projects in Thailand. I had visited him in California as well. And he agreed to take me on as like an associate director so that I could just kind of learn his methodology and work alongside him, and also work underneath his umbrella of nonprofit, his nonprofit. So just doing that, I really, it inspired me to take it to the next level, and I really want to be able to increase my scope of giving. So this past year I was in West Africa. I don't know if we have any students that might be heading over there or have been there, but West Africa, as many people know, is a region beset with challenges and difficulties, yet at the same time it's full of hope. And what I really enjoy about this work is that I find myself face to face with not only, the poverty and the disease or the malnutrition that exists. Yes, that's there, but at the same time, I'm seeking out these local heroes. And one thing that's really, really inspired me is the fact that throughout the world, there's people on the ground that are addressing the issues in their communities. And I feel like too often the development structure, the international development, tends to overlook a lot of these local heroes and try to impose their own solutions. And a lot of it, as you've probably studied, is very top-down. It's all about making sure that the communities are involved in their own development, because once you give them an ownership stake, or once you involve them in the process, they will become that much more enthused, and the project will become that much more effective. So, that's that's one of the lessons, and it's been incredible to meet some of these people that have given their homes and have given their lives and all of their time. I'll give you just a brief story, just one example. So my basic methodology, so last year I decided I wanted to go to West Africa. I'd never been there before. I wanted to improve my French, and I knew that West Africa had obviously a lot of issues to address. So I started researching the different countries and the different regions, the different issues in each country. And one of the things I came across was, I want to go to Guinea-Bissau, because I want to use my Portuguese in Africa, which is another little fantasy of mine. So Guinea-Bissau has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the world, and which is kind of, 10% of babies don't live to see their first birthday. And this is when you think about, I'm at the age, well, I'm not having kids, but my friends are having kids. And when I think about 10 of my friends and think about the fact that, well, one of them would lose their baby, at least one of them would lose their baby in Guinea-Bissau. And, mothers don't name their babies until they're 6 months old, which says a lot right there. And so that's the kind of thing I said, all right, infant mortality rate, well, let's see what I can do there to address this in some manner. So I did some research, and some of it before I got there, and then some of it when I got there, asking around. I was talking with health officials, and I was talking with local expats and development workers. And everyone kind of pointed me in the same direction, this clinic, Céu y Tierra, which means sky and earth. And it was founded by a Cuban doctor that was there 25 years ago, who came down on some, I think like a research project, and just stayed on, married an Italian development worker that was there, and she founded this clinic, maternal health clinic. So you have 1,000 women that are all HIV positive that are coming in there, and they are, now the vertical transmission rate from mother to child of HIV normally is 25%. So 25% of these kids are normally going to inherit the virus, which is, in that part of the world is pretty much an instant death sentence. So a clinic like this, if you're able to administer a simple retroviral drug to the mother during pregnancy and the child during the first, I think, 16 months of their life, that transmission rate is cut from 25% to 2.5%. Okay, so if you just do the math, you got 1,000 women. Let's say they each have, 2.5 kids, which is conservative, very conservative. That would be 2,500 kids. 25% of that would be about 750 kids that would normally have inherited this virus. Well, if you cut that to 2.5, that's 75 kids. So right there, you're talking about 650 kids that are going to be spared from the HIV virus. So, you talk about being on the front lines and finding a way to make a difference. I think that's one good example of how to plug in the money. So when I went to the clinic, I introduced myself. I said, look, I've obviously heard a lot of great things about the clinic. In many cases, I really try to keep a low profile, especially if I don't know anything about the project myself. I don't want to march in there and say, hi, I'm an American and I have a nonprofit and we have money to give away, because they're going to tell you whatever you want to hear. So in many cases, I mean, that's why some of the pictures you'll see, like from my website and from my videos, I'm just wearing like a tank top and, a pair of shorts, and, some people have told me, Adam, when you do this, you might want to look a little more professional, like people can see your tattoo. I'm like, well, that's one of the things that makes it a little more effective, is that when I show up, people don't really know what I'm doing, and so I can get a more honest idea of how the project's being run, or what's going on there. And so it was a situation like this in this clinic. I showed up and I said, listen, I'd like to know how the work's going and what you might need or whatever. And she's like, well, I can't believe you're sitting here telling me this, because, last week we just received word that one of our donors from Belgium or whatever had to back out for whatever economic reasons. She's like, I'm almost out of powdered milk right now, and when I run out of powdered milk, these mothers are going to be breastfeeding their kids, which is going to boost the probability of this virus being passed on. She's like, it's really simple, I need powdered milk. And then I said, okay, where do we get it? And she said, well, the supplier's on the other side of town. And I said, okay, well, why don't you send one of your workers with me, and we'll go buy it right now. And it was that simple. What do you need? I need 7 cases of that, I need 7 cases of that. Okay. And, I said, this is how much I've got to put towards this project. Let's, we'll send your worker in. I'm not going to walk in there and say, hi, how much does that cost? No, I'm going to wait out in the taxi. You let him do the little transaction. Tell me when we're done, we'll come in and get a picture, whatever. But, you got to be aware of these things. So something like that, it's a real simple model, but it's something that I think is very effective, because even though, having worked with the UN and having studied international development as a whole, I know that these multinational organizations are doing great work, and I respect them, and I respect the workers. But I also realize that, a lot of people aren't being touched that need to be, and there's a lot of need out there, and in many cases it's just a means of helping people get themselves on their feet. It's a means of helping people climb out of poverty on their own. I'm sure you guys are familiar with microcredit and everything. I've done a lot of work with some microcredit projects, and so I mean, every project has its own story, and as it grows, each one is just as special as the next. And what's really important to me, another real important aspect of my work with cause and effect is not only am I able to deliver these funds to people around the world, but I'm also creating an intercultural kind of exchange there. And on one level, that's simply through my field reports that I'm sending out to all of my donors and to all of my supporters and my email list that just grows. Because a lot of it is just raising awareness. I mean, for example, a lot of my friends in Chicago, I mean, I'm one of their links, to the outside world. I mean, not everybody gets up in the morning and checks out the world news page or is in tune with a lot of the issues going on in the world. So just by me being in these places and kind of reporting back these realities and solutions, it opens people's eyes, and then they can kind of spread the word, or they'll at least have an idea of what goes on, or they'll realize, wow, that's great. If I give $50, I can really help those people out, or whatever. So there's definitely an exchange there. And then another thing that I think is really important is involving kids in the process as well, which is why I try to speak with schools and have some high school programs, and working with colleges also, where college can create college can raise money. A group of students can raise money for a specific project, right? So I can go over and deliver their funds on behalf of them. I can even show I'll show a little video to the recipients. When I deliver money, it's important. I like everyone to understand, because a lot of people, when you show up and they think, oh, it's like a rich American and he's kind of giving this money. I like them to understand that, I'm not Mr. Deep Pockets, that, I'm working for myself in the summertime, but I'm also raising money, and I'm telling them that, this money that is helping you out is not coming from someone that just cuts a nice, nice check. It's in many cases just everyday people that are making the $10, $20, $50 donation just to help the cause. So people really, they get a lot out of that when they realize, that these are where this money's coming from. And so it's wonderful to be able to just kind of foster that exchange. And then, you can do a little video of these people in Guinea-Bissau thanking the, Lions High School for this. And then, you're just creating that relationship, or having clubs in schools where they can all rally behind a cause. Because when people can really feel, I think that the donors, it's really important. I think one thing that is missing in some philanthropy circles today is that real satisfaction, that real feedback to the donors, so they can really feel how far their money's going. And as I said, when I started to travel, I was all about finding, getting more bang for my buck. And I've carried that over into the philanthropy side of giving my donors more bang for their buck as well. And, so that's the basic model. And it's the kind of thing a lot of people I was mentioning this at lunch, a lot of people have said, wow, this work must be just so rewarding for you when you can leave someplace and know that you've made a difference. And I tell them it's actually kind of a double-edged sword. On one side, obviously, it is wonderful, but at the same time, part of me feels like there's so much more that I can do. And so, if I could, that's why I'm going through this whole nonprofit organization. It's quite a process, but the end goal is to be able to scale up the level of giving, so that instead of this $1,000 grant, it's a $10,000 grant, and onwards and upwards from there. So really, I think that for all you students, I think I think the most important thing is to always kind of keep sight of the fact that no matter how technical your work may be, or no matter how many loopholes you have to get through to do it, or how much frustration, it's all about actually delivering change to these communities. And I think as long as people keep focused on the end result, you know, the rest kind of falls into place. And again, you know, just keeping sight of the fact that you know, change happens on a micro level. You know, even if you know, I mean, the Clinton Foundation has billions of dollars to give away, and what makes them effective is that they're able to find ways to get those to these local communities, and then that's what it's all about, is really seeking out the most direct and most effective way of delivering whatever funds that are there to be distinguished. So I'd love to open it up for any questions that we may have.
Sita? Yeah.
So much. Do this. Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. I hate speaking in front of people. I'm Skip's daughter, Mary Rutherford.
Pleasure.
So I really appreciate you coming for him, but also this is just so fascinating. As the political economy and international relations major who spent time in Argentina, Honduras, and where else have I been, Dad? Colombia. I know I am so passionate about this issue and have studied it immensely. And have always had, I'm just not nearly as smart as you, so I don't think I could have done what you did.
I wouldn't sell yourself short.
I'm so happy with my new job as an attorney, but if I ever get fired, expect a phone call.
I'm ready. We need attorneys too.
Well, one thing I've always battled with, or always been curious about, and can't find a solution to, and I'm sure you've thought about this too, is why, with all of the money in the world, with all the NGOs, IGOs, with the money that the United States is, you know, has available to them alone through, you know, USAID or whatever, with Bill Gates, with, you know, Donald Trump, I don't know if he gives any money away, but why can't we solve this problem? Because I know, like you said, some of it is so inexpensive. Some of it's $20. I mean, I know with the Grameen Foundation, the stuff that they're doing, I mean, he's obviously a genius, and I think your approach is target, but why can't we get it all in one place and distribute it out more effectively and get this problem solved?
Sure. I mean, yeah, you know, obviously with the amount of capital that's floating around the world, if it was plugged into the right, you know, in the right manner, we would be cutting back on world poverty as a whole. Well, obviously, you know, I think the major roadblock is corruption. And that's all too apparent on every level of society, and it's one thing that has kind of driven me towards my approach, which is to avoid governments completely. I've heard way too many stories from development workers that work with any size of organizations or on their own, that the second the government's involved, they're losing at least 30% of their funds. A gentleman that I was just speaking with actually just sold my father his car. He's from Guatemala, and he's like, look, I got to find a way to work with you because I've been trying to make a difference in my community in Guatemala, and you know, I sent down these wheelchairs for these people down there, and like the local mayor like took it and sold it and didn't even pass it on to the people. You know, I mean, that's like a most obvious example. Is the corruption. Obviously, when you're talking about, you know, obviously there's matters of scale as well, you know, in addressing such a widespread issue of whether it's poverty or, you know, reduction of disease. But I think, you know, as I said, one of the first things is just to try to circumvent that corruption. And you know, I don't know. Obviously, if you're talking about doing that with billions of dollars, there's going to be you're going to have to be going through governments at some level, you know. But that's one thing that I like about my approach, is that I'm able to really kind of go in as a tourist, and I can just distribute it without having any of that interference, really. Sure.
No.
Yeah, you got to ask him.
Okay, no, don't let it.
We'll come back to you, Mary. Over here, Bob. Yep.
Sir?
You.
Your story is very inspirational. I have two questions. Do you have a way of keeping in touch with projects, for example, last year, to see that your work there is carried on? And the second one is, do you have plans, or are you thinking of leveraging your experiences and getting others involved in your organization to be in more places at one time, so to speak?
Sure, sure. Those are both very valid questions. And you know, the idea of you know, sustainability is obviously something that I've considered. And you know, there's for some of these projects, I'm making a targeted contribution, like a micro grant, towards something that I know needs to be addressed, and is the kind of thing like as I said, the kitchen in the kitchen in the orphanage in Cambodia. Once I provide those kitchen supplies, I don't really need to follow up and make sure that, like, you know, the spoons are still there, and you know, that the cleaver's still sharp, or whatever. So in some of those cases, I can kind of move on to the next project. But I do form, you know, relationships with some of these projects where it can be an ongoing thing. I was in Sierra Leone last year, for example, and found some incredible projects in Sierra Leone, a country that really is on the rebound after the Civil War ended about 7 years ago. And there's a lot of hope in Sierra Leone, and there's a lot of wonderful local people there that have created some wonderful projects for the kids in Sierra Leone. And so that's the kind of thing, when I was over there and helped out a project there, had a real nice rapport with this project, and I actually formed a really close friendship with one of these gentlemen. And so that's the kind of thing where, you know, and I kind of leave it up to the projects as well. Some of them, depending on how they react, I'll tell them, you know, let's stay in contact, and, you know, send me feedback. And so if they really are pursuing that, you know, I'll be much more willing to say, well, maybe we can find a way to, you know, to provide another grant. And so something like that in Sierra Leone, using my friend as kind of the conduit, you know, I've sent some more money over so that they can go to him. And, you know, everything is like, he's got the money, and then they have to send him the proposal, and then he okays this money to them, and then they send back everything itemized, like, this is what we bought, and they're great. They take the pictures. This is the basketball that we bought. These are the kids playing with the basketball. These are the shirts we bought. These are the kids wearing the shirts, you know. So to kind of keep that going. So to answer your question, yes, at times there is that relationship that continues on, and at times it's kind of like, great, we did what we wanted to do, and, you know, we can go on. And your second question is to involve others in this kind of work. Definitely, that's definitely one of my aims with cause and effect, and what I'm hoping to do. I mean, obviously, looking forward, if it came to that level, is to be able to have, you know, a few different people in the field doing the kind of work that I'm doing. I mean, ideally, if the funds are there, I would love to have a kind of a micro-philanthropist in Africa, and a micro-philanthropist in Latin America, and a micro-philanthropist in Southeast Asia, a micro-philanthropist here at home as well, to be able to search out projects and administer aid and follow up with them as well. And that's something that obviously we are hoping will come to fruition in the coming years. But that would be ideal, to really have a team out there, because I've met a lot of people. A lot of people say, Adam, you're the only one that can do this. Well, actually, you'd be surprised. I'm sure there's a few kids in this room right now that would be able to do this kind of work with me. So I would hope that will develop one of these days. Definitely, sir.
How many of your beer customers know of your philanthropy?
That's a good question. More and more, actually. Last summer, I had a nice article on the front page of the Chicago Tribune, which provided me a lot of positive exposure, which is actually how I met Chad Smith, who produced the film about the Cubs, who, you know, he said, I got to meet this guy. And then, since then, you know, I think word of mouth, I'm at all the games. I have a regular, like at the Sox games, I work in one section, so I have a lot of regular customers, and same thing at Cubs. I've been working there for 16 years, so you get to have a lot of nice little personal relationships with fans. And once they kind of learn what you're doing, they're really fascinated because they just look at me as just some, oh yeah, that's the beer guy, that's our guy, he's a beer guy, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, you do that? And I'm like, yeah, like, why didn't you ever tell me? Well, how's it gonna come, how'd that come up in a conversation? Like, you know, they're like, yeah, Dempster looks like crap today. I'm like, yeah, well, you know, when I was in Guinea-Bissau, you know, like, that's a tough segue, you know. But this year, you know, I've also got I just had a nice piece on the ABC News in Chicago, so more and more people, and what I do now is I give away, I've got some afterwards, I give away these little baseball cards to fans, really only the fans that tip me, but these little cards, because I figure, you know, if you're not a generous soul to give your beer man 50 cents, I mean, I can't really expect you to go to the website and make a contribution. So I got these baseball cards printed up, which kind of tell my story, and it's a great way. The whole point of that is to get fans to the website. So I've got this site called Beer Guy. So beerguy.org is kind of like the, that's kind of the intro. That'll get people, that's for the baseball fans. So there's a whole bunch of, there's a lot of the content here is really based on beer vending. And people, for some reason, are fascinated with this job. I still haven't figured it out, but when I tell people I'm a beer vendor, they just, I'm like a cocktail party favorite. It's like, this guy's a beer guy, okay. So this is kind of like, so I don't have to tell the same stories over and over again. I can just send them to the website. But the point of this really is to get people to the site so that they can then obviously donate and they can learn about what cause and effect is. And so more and more fans are kind of learning about my work, and the goal is to get them to support. I mean, you know, I get fans that once in a while they'll give me a check, which is wonderful, or, you know, you'll get the 80-year-old woman who's like, here's $3 for your trip, you know, spend it well. I'm like, great, thank you so much, it's wonderful, and try to get them on the email list so they can get these reports and see where their money's going and everything. So more and more fans are jumping on board. Did you have a question there? And then you're next. Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Kim, I'm a student here, and I just wanted to say, first of all, there's so much brilliance in what you're doing, and I know probably some of the other students are thinking about how this aligns with our curriculum that we're learning right now, specifically with engaging communities and recognizing the strengths they have versus the problems and investing in locally. I mean, it's so inspiring to hear what we're learning be expressed in action, and also, I just think it's so cool that you're a beer guy.
See, there you go.
You don't think about people with master's degrees who've worked for the UN serving beer. It's brilliant.
Yeah, but there's not that many. But at the same, yeah, I've had fans say, you know, I think you've got to be the only, you know, beer guy that's a Fulbright scholar. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? I'm probably the only Fulbright scholar that's actually a beer guy. So it depends how you look at it. But go ahead.
I guess what I wanted to hear about is, and clearly you've addressed sustainability already. And as we're sitting here thinking, all right, what brilliance can I borrow from him and apply to my life's mission? How do you think about where to invest your time as well as your money? I mean, what is the process for that? And how do you feel that will make your life's work?
You mean like specific projects in general, or I mean specific projects? You just mean in general?
I guess what I'm trying to understand is, so you wanted to use French and you wanted to use Portuguese. Awesome, go to Africa. Once you get there, what criteria do you have, or is it even criteria? I mean, how do you figure out how you're going to take this $1,000?
How do I find a project?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. A lot of it has to do with you know, contacts, local contacts, or cultivating those contacts. And it's one of these things, obviously there's no textbook answer for that. So some of it is doing the research on my own, obviously starting online and seeing what's out there. But more often than not, I'm not going to really pick a project by surfing the web. More often than not, once I get somewhere, I'm looking for people that are plugged into these kind of communities. So for example, like when I went to West Africa, I started out in Dakar in Senegal. So in the capital of Dakar, I had gotten in touch, I had a contact there, a gentleman who's one of the directors of the World Bank, okay, for West Africa. So I wrote him an email, explained what I was doing. I said, look, I'd love to we could just grab coffee or lunch or something. I'd love to kind of just talk to. He's like, oh, wow, this looks so cool. You're a beer vendor, and da-da-da. So, so I just sat down with him in his office, and I said, look, obviously, you work for the World Bank. You're building a $6 billion bridge in Senegal. Obviously, I'm not going to come and try to chip in $1,000 to your bridge. That being said, someone like that has got, it's like the 6 degrees of separation. Someone like that it just kind of trickles down. So when he says, all right, this sounds great. I'd love to help you. What countries? And I start rattling them off. When I get to Sierra Leone, he goes, wait, picks up his phone. Mohammed, come out to my office right now. Boom. Mohammed comes up. Yes, sir. This is Mohammed, one of our economists. He's from Sierra Leone. And, oh, this is what you want to do? Oh, my God, I've got some incredible people for you to talk to. So it's really kind of a chain. I mean, the gentleman that my mentor, he's done so much work in Asia that I've got a real extensive kind of contact list there. And, I'd be happy to, I was explaining to Skip earlier, I'd be happy to share any contacts that I may have with any of you guys. I think that, it is kind of daunting to find a project, and find which, and so I'd be happy to put you in contact with anyone that I can. And I think that from there, it's just a matter of talking to them and let it kind of trickle down. And, I mean, my experience, I'd bring up what I'm looking for, and if they don't know someone, they know someone that will know someone, or, so each one has been kind of, in many cases, very serendipitous. I mean, I've been sitting on buses before when you talk to someone and they're like, oh, really, you're a teacher? What kind of school? Oh, a high school, really? Well, do you happen to know of anyone, and then everything kind of comes together, so. What did you had a question?
Hold on, Patrick. Just come.
I'm not going to stand because I'm right in front of you. That feels kind of awkward to me. My name is Patrick Banks. I'm also a student at the Clinton School. And I guess that we've been hearing over the past month from all these different organizations who encourage people to give and to say this is the impact that we're making. And I guess I wanted to know, how do you convey, how do you convince people that giving to you means something, that you're doing something? I know you talked about how you list out itemized receipts to say, well, this is how much money we spent on this issue. But what are some strategies that you use to show people, hey, it really is relevant to give to my organization?
Sure. It's a good question. The first thing is I try to really stress the fact that at this point there's no overhead, Having traveled for the last 13 years on my own, I'm used to this mode of travel, and I'm traveling anyway, so I'm not, all my travel expenses are obviously paid for out of pocket, and for me at this point, I can guarantee my donors that all that money is going straight to these projects. One thing I try to do is give people individualized stories and just try to personalize it as much as I can, because that's the way that, I mean, you'll hear about, for example, like being in Sierra Leone. A good example, I was speaking at a high school a few weeks ago, and it's a really big high school, like 4,000 students, and I was invited to speak to their student council, and I really wanted them to become involved. And so I started off by, you got all these high school kids, and we all know how hard it is to kind of keep their attention at times. So I started off, I just said, look, you guys probably hear your parents say, you have so much to be thankful for. I heard it when I was your age. It didn't mean that much to me either, because I didn't really understand it. I said, I just want to tell you about a friend of mine who would love to come to this school, and I told him about a kid that I had met in Sierra Leone who, I mean, it's a horrific story, but his whole family had been killed by the rebels, and they caught him and they were about to kill him, and he begged for his life, and they said pick a leg, and he pointed to his right, and they hacked it off with machetes, and now it's 7, 8 years later, and he's 14 years old, and he doesn't have anywhere to live, he doesn't have any family, he can't go to school, da-da-da-da. So once I could kind of, I mean, I definitely jolted the crowd, and these kids, after that, they're kind of like, okay, and then I can tell them, this is how we can help, So I think that's an important way to kind of personalize it and bring it, as I was saying to you guys, like in closing, was that, we have to keep in mind this work that we do, that it is all about delivering to the individual, and obviously at a certain point we have to think we're scaling things up, and we're thinking about big strategies, which is important as well. But in the end, the focus has to be on the individual, because that's where the change is taking place. And it's the gentleman who I delivered some wheelchairs in Mali, and it's this guy just looking at me and saying, "You don't understand. My life is never going to be the same," and that's the kind of thing that made a big impact on me. And when I go, in all the work that I put into this now, without any, with just kind of the stress and everything that comes along with that, I try to keep that focus and just try to keep that in the back of my mind to keep me motivated,
Howie, in the back.
Hi, my name is Allie Tura. I'm also a student here at the Clinton School. So we know that working overseas, especially in developing countries, brings with it many complexities. And foreign aid typically tends to exist on a spectrum where you have relief aid on one end and development aid on the other end, and both come with their own challenges. With relief aid, it often fosters a dependence on foreign countries, which is often the last thing developing countries need. Whereas development aid works to empower individuals to help themselves, but as you said, there's a lot of obstacles in working with governments and multilateral organizations. So I was wondering if you could speak to the long-term impact and the role that your organization will play along that spectrum, and its effectiveness in doing so. And secondly, could you also speak to some of the work that you do in Chicago's public schools? Because I know it's not as glamorous as going to West Africa or Brazil, but equally as important.
Definitely. Well, to answer your first question, I think some organizations really focus on, obviously they're focused on kind of the communal development model, or they're focused on relief work. In general, I would say that I lean more towards projects that are involved with the communal development side. But that being said, there's also a lot of need on just kind of on a personal level sometimes of families, and sometimes I find that what's really needed, if there's not a local project established for some of these people, is just providing some money to help families buy like food or medicine or something, for example. So I mean, for example, when I was in Mauritania last year in the Sahara, and the desertification there in the southern part of the country is just rampant, and people are being forced from their villages where they've lived for hundreds and hundreds of years because all the water's drying up and there's nowhere for their goats to graze. And so a lot of these people are moving, just the only place they can go is to these shanty towns in the city. So I was in one of these neighborhoods to help out, and I found that I couldn't find a reputable organization to work through. And so I had a friend there that was a captain in the Army, and I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, well, what we can do is, I know we can go to one of these neighborhoods, and we can just talk to the people and, find some families, kind of individuals. And that's the kind of thing where you can, you can see kids, and you can meet these families, and, when you see a sick child and you see a family of 11 living in a tent, and that kid needs medicine, you can see that the parents don't have the means to provide that. That's the kind of thing where, okay, all of a sudden it becomes, this is a relief project. So it's hard to, I don't like to draw the line there. Sometimes there's definitely going to be an overlap, And then the second half of your question, which was what?
Chicago.
The schools, Chicago Public Schools, definitely. When I started this, I really wanted the focus is still on the developing world, just because the money goes further, and there are a lot of organizations that are doing a lot of great work here in the States. But, we've kind of started to allocate some funds definitely towards some local projects. It's also important when you're a lot of donors want to know that you do address some domestic projects as well. So what we're starting out with is a project that we all know that art and music education has been cut out of the public schools to a very, very harrowing degree, and there's so many studies out there to show how important this this facet of children's education is. So we've found a wonderful project working in Chicago that provides like an after-school music program to some of these inner-city Chicago public schools. And even though our involvement at this point, is not on a huge level as far as financial involvement, we're definitely, we're forming a partnership. I'm actually, when I go home, just the day before I go to Guatemala, I'm going out to the first one of these programs. This music program starts a few weeks after the school year has begun because it's not a part of the general curriculum, so they like to get the students kind of rolling in their general curriculum, and then they can start this program up. So I will actually be out there for the first day of this year's program, which is going to be really exciting because, I mean, I am a proud product of the Chicago Public Schools, and I mean, I understand the budget problems that they have, but it's just really a shame to reflect that so much of the school curriculum is becoming so standardized, and so yeah, we'll be addressing that.
We do have time for one more.
One more
right,
question.
Right there.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I'm curious about what sort of support you've gotten from the Cubs or the White Sox, either the teams or players in terms of donations or helping you to raise the profile of the foundation.
Chad's shaking his head.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He answers. No, he's shaking his head in frustration. Well, the thing is this: these teams have their own kind of community development programs, and they have, they give out grants. Okay, most of that is all focused on local. I mean, if I wanted to go build a baseball diamond, I'm sure I'd be in much better shape. I just did a little private. One of my fundraisers this week and a half ago was a private tour of Wrigley, which was really cool. And I thought, wow, this is going to be a great way for me to. I've been working here for 16 years. I'm definitely trying to provide a positive example for the Cubs and for Wrigley, and that'll be really nice to kind of come in. And I got charged for the tickets, but. So we're working. It's a work in progress. But what I will say is one thing that's really what we're trying to pursue is getting players on board, and the players, yeah, because the thing is I can sit down with a player and I can offer that player something that other organizations can't, which is, look, I know you make X amount of money a year, all right, and I know that you already give X amount of dollars a year towards charity, whether that's for tax purposes or whether that's for purely compassionate reasons. That doesn't bother me. That's wonderful. Congratulations. That being said, a lot of these players do want to help out in their local communities, in their local countries. And they can't really do all of that at the same time. Well, the charter of my nonprofit is to help out these local organizations, right? So someone like that can make a donation towards cause and effect, which would be tax deductible, and then I can take that money down to their country, to their community, and I can give it out in their name also. I mean, I'm not doing it for my ego. I'm like, I told them, like, I'll wear your jersey. Like, you can come cut the little ribbon. That's fine with me, So that's definitely something that I'm hoping to develop in the coming years, because I think it's a good model that could just grow, And once you get obviously a few high-profile players on board, it helps obviously publicize the cause. So it's a good question.